What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Sports Nerds podcast here on the 515 Podcast Network. I'm Brock Bierman alongside, as always, with my buddy Dawson Livingston. First week of college, right, for the semester?
Yep.
And
last semester of college.
I was going to say last semester of college. You are graduating in the spring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you graduating this fall?
Hopefully next spring I'm graduating from the University of Iowa with my sport and recreation major, and then hopefully with an athletic administration certificate. So we'll see. We got 2 semesters to go.
I mean, I'm excited for you, except for that you went to the University of Iowa, but that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. But we're here to preview what should be a very, very exciting division in the NFL with the AFC North. I mean, this division kind of for most of our lives has been very competitive. It's gone through different eras. You know, Ben Roethlisberger was a main staple with the Steelers over the past couple decades before he retired. Joe Flacco had a good run with the Ravens at one point. Bengals, even with Andy Dalton, were competitive in the division. The Browns, on the other hand, have kind of been bouncing around. It looks like they're starting to get a little bit on the right track. We'll see what happens this season. But how do you feel about this division going into the season?
Yeah, I think this is one of the better divisions in the NFL. I think you could put them right up there with the NFC North. I think every team in this division feels like they can make a deep playoff run. Even a team like Pittsburgh, who has been in the Brandon Ayuk trade rumors for weeks now, if they're able to get him and they're able to find something in their quarterbacks with either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, I think they're really going to be set up good for the future.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Brandon Ayuk trade rumors that have been swirling around with the Steelers. Still nothing has happened with Ayuk in the 49ers, which is kind of weird as we get closer and closer to the season starting here. And I mean, when you look at it, you look at the Steelers, they're still trying to figure out their quarterback situation. It sounds like Russell Wilson's probably going to end up being the QB1 for the first week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But at the same time, I don't know if that's necessarily what fans want. I'm not sure what Steeler fans are looking at heading into this season with the quarterback situation. But if they're able to find a way to get Brandon Ayuk, automatically their offense is way better. And the best part about this team is that you don't have to worry about the defense because the defense is already amazing with TJ Watt and company. I know that they're going to be able to keep the Steeler team in a lot of games this season, which is why when we start previewing this, we will then realize that I actually have good hopes for the Steelers heading into the season. I think Dawson's fixing his Wi-Fi here right now, but we'll get into the first team on the AFC North that, I mean, a lot of people are going to be talking about, and that is, of course, the Baltimore Ravens. And when you look at this team, 13-4 last season, I think they were around 500 or exactly 500 in the division, and they had a good run last season. A lot of games where they were able to pick up some big wins. The one that I think about the most is the 49ers win in the regular season last year, where a lot of people at the time were talking about the 49ers being the number one team in the NFL. And then that following week, Lamar Jackson and company just outplayed them completely. So, I mean, they have retooled, got some guys on this roster that could impact the team a lot. Derrick Henry is one that comes to mind. He came from the Titans. We'll see if he's going to be able to be a focal point in this offense, which I definitely think he will be. As Dawson, I think, is still trying to fix his Wi-Fi. We'll see what's going on here. But yeah, they 13-3 last season. You look at their schedule this season, they start out on the road with a trip to Kansas City, which is no easy task for any team. So, and then they follow that up by a home opener against the Raiders, go to the Cowboys week 3, and then at home against the Bills. So kind of an iffy start to the schedule if you look at the Ravens. I mean, you don't want to go to Kansas City or Dallas if you're any team. I think Dallas went undefeated last year at home, and then Kansas City at Arrowhead is one of the toughest places to play. But then you got the Raiders at home, which I think is pretty much an easy win. I think we got Dawson back here.
Yeah, we're back. Had a maintenance guy come through. He had to make sure that my house is all in order, but now we're back.
Okay, you're good. I was just talking about the Ravens. how they were 13-4 correction last year, a pretty solid season. I talked about how the Ravens, had some big wins in the regular season. A lot of people were hyping up the 49ers last year, and then the Ravens right on cue just came in and just wiped the floor with them. But then I also mentioned the additions of Derrick Henry, and then this whole offense that is coming back with Lamar Jackson, former MVP. What are your thoughts on the Ravens heading into this year? I do think they have an iffy start to their schedule with a trip to Kansas City in week 1 and a trip to Dallas in week 3. But do you think they're going to be back at the top of the AFC North?
It's tough to project that as of right now because the pieces that they've lost in the offseason. We already, I don't know if you touched on it already, but they lost guys like Davion Clowney or Odell Beckham Jr. They lost some offensive line help to New York. They lost their second best linebacker in Patrick Queen to the Steelers, which is only going to make it that much worse that they got to play him 2 times a year. They lost one of their starting safeties in Geno Stone to Cincinnati, which is going to hurt this year. But I really like still what Baltimore's got. I'm a little concerned about their receiving core still. I feel like that's been a concern for Baltimore at the last 5-6 years, ever since they've had Lamar. They have Zay Flowers, who I think they nailed the pick. I think Zay Flowers is going to be a stud for him. But outside of that, Mark Andrews has dealt with some injuries over the last few years, so we'll see if he's able to get back on track. They have plenty of other good running backs and tight ends that are going to be able to help, but it's that vertical downfield passing attack that really needs to improve for Baltimore in order for them to really get them over the hump. But I like some of the moves they made in the offseason. Adding Nate Wiggins in the first round is only going to solidify their cornerback room even more. He was one of the faster cornerbacks in this last draft, which is going to help their speed alongside Marlon Humphrey. They still got guys like Kyle Hamilton and obviously Roquan Smith. So their defense is still going to be really solid. Obviously, I know you touched on it. I'm sure for Derrick Henry, it's only going to just diversify this offense even more. They don't have to rely on Lamar to have 15, 20 carries a game. They can give it to Derrick. Even though Derrick's getting up there in age, I still think Derrick is still going to be a really good addition for him. So, yeah, I overall really liked what Baltimore did. I don't know if they're going to be able to get back to that 13-4 record. I think that's going to be tough for them, but I still really like what they're doing in the offseason.
Yeah, the defensive losses are huge, and also they lost their defensive coordinator in McDonald to Seattle as he became the head coach there. So, I mean, this is just an interesting team because I feel like they do have the tools to get back to where they were last year and potentially contend for a Super Bowl championship. But at the same time, some of the players that they've acquired are up there in age. So who knows how many of them are going to be elite or on that elite level that they may have once been on with, Derrick Henry. And then also, when you end up having a good season, you usually get a tough schedule or tougher schedule. And, some of these road games are going to be very tough for the Ravens. I mean, even at Houston and at Tampa Bay, those are 2 games that I feel like are no cakewalks anymore. I mean, they got the fortunate thing of being able to host, their division team. So like playing the Bengals at home, Steelers at home, and the Browns at home are going to be huge games for them. If they come out on top on all 3 of those, they're going to be in really good shape when it comes to the division. Looking at their record wise, or at least scheduling wise, there wasn't a game that I don't feel like they can't win. Confidence wise, though, there are some games where I'm not confident in, and that has to do a lot with their road schedule. I mean, I'm not confident that they're going to be able to beat the Chiefs, but of course, you got to look at it as, Super Bowl hangover. That's or championship hangover in general. A lot of teams struggle that first game after winning a championship, no matter which league you're in. But at Kansas City, at Dallas, at Cincinnati, at Cleveland, at Pittsburgh, the divisional teams, and then at Houston. Those games I'm a little concerned with if I'm the Ravens, just because those are going to be tough places to play. And even with that, though, I'm still confident that this team will be able to compete at a high level. This is very peak. Like, we're talking like Lamar Jackson, MVP all over again. Derrick Henry is not 2,000 rushing yards, but Derrick Henry is still King Henry. I could see them actually improving from last year and maybe getting 14 wins, but 13 is probably where I would see them at their total peak. And then their floor, I don't see anywhere where they don't get double-digit wins this season. So I kind of have them around the 10-11 spot. If for some reason the divisional games actually end up being a little more competitive.
Yeah, we got very similar ceiling and floors for the Ravens. I would say my ceiling for them is 12 because I think with the overall improvement within the division this year, Cleveland's finally going to have Watson for a full season. Is going to be healthy, presumably. Joe Burrow's going to be healthy this season. The Steelers are finally going to have a quarterback. I think those divisional games are going to be tougher than they were last year for Baltimore. So with that, I would say their ceiling is 12 wins. And I'd say their floor is only about 10-7. Like, they're still, like you said, they're going to win double-digit games as long as no major injuries happen. This is a very talented roster, and they still have a great head coach in John Harbaugh. So I trust the Ravens going forward.
If they don't win double-digit games this year, prepare for the offseason. That's all I got to say with this team. Just because that's a interesting thing to think about, because not many people are considering this team having under 10 wins this season, and they're in a tough division. So if they don't hit that 10-win plus mark, it could be a very rough offseason for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
So after the Ravens, I mean, what team do you want to talk about next? I'm kind of shaky on some teams this year and actually have some more expectations than other teams. So which one do you want to hit on next for the AFC North?
Let's talk about Cleveland.
Cleveland? All right.
Yeah.
So the Browns, one of the more interesting teams in my personal opinion, because they're similar to the Steelers, which we'll get to the Steelers, where their defense is pretty much the reason they win and lose games. The offense is more why they lose games. The defense is why they win games. I mean, you think about the game against San Francisco last year where the 49ers missed a kick to lose in like early season. It was like week 4 or 5, it felt like. That was all defense. That kept the Browns in that game. And the weather may have helped a little bit, but even then, the Browns defense was just unstoppable. And, Myles Garrett, that guy is not a guy that you want to be on the offensive side and see on the other side of the ball. And so when you look at this team, I actually, 11-6 last year. I think they were 8-1 at home. I could be wrong. I think they were 8-1 at home. So very good home record, which means they only lost one game, and I'm pretty sure that was against a divisional opponent. So the question is, though, is Deshaun Watson going to be Deshaun Watson that we knew back in Houston where he was all-pro, or even at Clemson where he was winning national championships? We haven't seen that in a while because obviously the off-the-field situations has happened, and he hasn't really played a bunch of games since then. Cleveland paid a bunch for this guy. So do you think that Deshaun's going to get back to that level that we kind of know him for a little bit, not for a long period of time, but do you think he's going to get back there?
It's tough because when he was at Clemson and his first few years in Houston, Deshaun was one of the most electrifying players in the NFL. Like, I don't think that's really a debate against anyone. What sucks is we haven't seen that since 2020. We're going on 4 years since we've seen a really, really good Deshaun Watson. I mean, last year when he played, the Browns did go 5-1 in games he started, but his QBR was only 42.9, which 50 is average. So he was a slightly below average quarterback for him. He only had 7 touchdowns. He had 4 picks, 61% completion percentage. Like, those aren't great numbers, but Cleveland did go 5-1 with him. And if you average that out there over the season, obviously they'd finish with they'd go more than 11-6. I think Cleveland's biggest issue right now is just stability at quarterback, whether it's Watson or whether it's someone else. And I think they did that this offseason by adding Jameis Winston, who people can poo-poo on Jameis Winston all you want, but Jameis Winston, I think me and you can agree, is one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league, if not the best backup quarterback in the league. Just because he has like starter level experience for multiple seasons. So if anything were to happen, he's able to step in right away. Because you take the Joe Flacco games and the Deshaun Watson games out, Cleveland quarterbacks that started games were Dorian Thompson-Robinson, PJ Walker, and Jeff Driscoll. They had 5 different quarterbacks start games for them last year. So if they're able to just find consistency at the quarterback position, I think this team's going to be really good. It does suck that Nick Chubb is not going to play for him until probably, week 7, week 8, recovering from that torn ACL, or was it torn Achilles? One of the two.
One of the more nastier injuries
I've
ever seen.
But if they're able to find stability at quarterback, if they have a healthy Nick Chubb come back, I think Cleveland's going to be a force in the AFC North.
I will say, I don't know if you saw, but DTR was informed that he will be making the final cuts in the final roster. So now there are some rumors about whether or not Jameis Winston will actually be traded by the Cleveland Browns or cut. So if Jameis Winston is cut, that's a bold move, in my opinion, for the Cleveland Browns, and weakens their quarterback room, just because I think he's the best backup quarterback that you can ask for in the NFL. And so if they get rid of him, DTR is your second guy, or I think PJ Walker may be on the roster. I don't know, but like the fact that Jameis is getting rumored to be either getting traded or cut, it's not a good move, in my personal opinion, for the Cleveland Browns. And you mentioned Nick Chubb kind of being out. I will say Jerry Jeudy might be able to provide a little bit of help in that receiver core. But even then, I still think that this team is going to be able to actually have a decent season just because of how good I feel like their defense is going to be or could be. And so they're probably, out of all of the teams, if I look correctly, out of all the teams in this division, I actually have, this is the team with the widest like difference between ceiling and floor for me. I have them around 11-6 for the ceiling. I actually do think that they could repeat with the record of last year, and last year was rough to say the least with their roster situation. At the same time, I could see them actually completely falling apart with their current offensive situation. Let's say, so Nick Chubb's not going to be there until week 7. Week 7, before that, you have at Eagles versus the Cowboys, at Jaguars, at Commanders, who's a rising team, at the Raiders, who a lot of people may consider to be a rising team as well. So I could see this team actually only winning 7 or 8 games. So that's my floor for Cleveland is 7-10 or 8-9.
I would say I'm probably a little bit higher on this Cleveland team than from what you just said. I say their floor is like, maybe their floor is still 8 wins, like you said, and that's if Deshaun Watson is just, we're never going to see Clemson Deshaun, we're never going to see Houston Deshaun ever again. And he's a below average quarterback for the rest of this year. But if they're able to tap into what he had 4 or 5 years ago, which I know is asking a lot out of a player, I mean, I think this team could easily win. Their ceiling could be 12 games. I really like what Cleveland's got going for them. Plus, I don't think we can talk enough about the generational defensive player that they have on that side of the ball in Myles Garrett. I think Myles Garrett, he's on pace to be a first ballot Hall of Famer in his career. I'll say that right now. Dude is an absolute freak.
I agree.
So I just think that with that defense, and you still, like you said, they have a solid receiving core. They still have David Njoku. I really like what Cleveland's got. So I'd say their ceiling's like 12 wins.
I respect that. I just, and it's just more of, I can't trust this offense more than their defense isn't good. Their defense is what's going to keep them in games. I actually trust the Steelers offense a little more than I do the Browns offense this year for some reason. And probably a lot of that has to do with their running back situation, just because who knows when Chubb is going to get back in. But yeah, I got this team around 11 wins as their peak, and then I could see them falling all the way to 7-10, 8-9, depending on the situation. But yeah, any final thoughts on the Cleveland Browns?
Not really. Actually, I do. I have Jerome Ford in fantasy, who's going to start for him. I need Jerome Ford to go crazy these first few weeks that Chubb's not back. That's all I'm going to say.
Last year, he was on my team I'm in like a 12-person fantasy league. So, everybody's got like second and third string running backs because that's what happens. I dropped him, I think, the week or two before Nick Chubb got hurt.
That's rough. That's rough.
That's all I got to say. And I regret it till this day. But next up, let's talk about. I want to talk about the Steelers last, just because you can talk a lot about them. The Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, 9-8 last year. Of course, Joe Burrow was hurt. 1-5 versus divisional teams. 6-3 at home. 3-5 on the road. And I mean, they made some good, I feel like good additions, this past offseason with Zach Moss and Mike Gesicki. Gesicki is an interesting tight end because, I feel like he got a lot of hype after the first 1 or 2 years in Miami and then kind of just disappeared. And a lot of that has to do with he was in New England at one point, and New England has fallen off the face of the earth since Tom Brady has left. But can he be a huge addition for this Bengals team at the same time? They lost Joe Mixon, so they replaced him with Zach Moss. What are your thoughts on this Bengals team? I'm assuming you're way higher on this Bengals team than I am, because I actually think that this team, well, I'll get more into that after we preview the Steelers, but I think this team could have a stinker of a season, potentially.
I like Cleveland. I like Cincinnati, but I'm getting weird vibes from right now. I don't like that Jamar is still having this contract dispute. I'm not a fan of T. Higgins playing on a franchise tag. I just don't know. I like Joe Burrow a lot. Joe Burrow is one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch in the league, just the way he's able to dissect the defense. But right now, I'm just getting weird vibes from Cincinnati, which sucks because I think Cincinnati is one of the few teams that can go toe-to-toe with Kansas City and say, like, yo, we've beaten you twice. Or, no. Yeah, we've beaten you in your own building in the AFC title game to go to the Super Bowl. Like, not a whole lot of teams can say that other than the Tom Brady Patriots. So, I think that's...
You say that sucks, but let's be honest, you don't care. You're actually happy that if they have a bad season.
Well, I like watching Joe Burrow, and the fact that Cincinnati, I don't think is going to be nearly as good as they were in the last few years is kind of a bummer for me. I like some of the additions, like you said. They added Zach Moss. They added Mike Gesicki. They added Trent Brown, the tackle from New England, who honestly Cincinnati needs all the tackle help in the world, which is going to help them. They added my boy from Iowa, Geno Stone, who's going to play safety for him, who I think, I could be wrong on this, I think led the NFL in picks last year, or was top 3 in the NFL in picks at one point, which is going to help. I just don't know what to make. Like you said, they lost Joe Mixon. They lost Tyler Boyd to Tennessee. I think Jonah Williams went to the Cardinals, or am I thinking of someone else? DJ Reader went to the Lions, I believe, and Chidobe Awuzie. I'm blanking on what team he went to right there. But they lost some help on defense, which is going to help, which is going to hurt them. Okay. It's going to hurt them. I know that they're... Oh, man. My face cam is frozen. I know that their first-round pick from last year, Myles Murphy, I think is going to be out for a good chunk of the year. Because I know he got hurt in preseason, which is a bummer for them because he's one of their better pass rushers on the team. I would say their floor is 7. Well, no, I'll say it's 8 wins just because they went 9-8 last year, and I think a lot of things went wrong. I would say their ceiling, though, I mean, I'm never going to count out Joe Burrow. It's got to be 12 wins.
Real quick, it was announced that Jamar Chase is expected to play in the season opener versus the Patriots. Take what you will with that information for fantasy people. Yeah, I pretty much have the same thing. Where's your ceiling for them? Again, sorry about that.
No, you're good. They're like Cleveland for me. Their floor and ceiling are so far apart just because I don't really know what to make of this team. I would say their ceiling is 12-5.
Yep. So I got their ceiling at 11-6, and their floor around 9-8, 8-9 as well. So we're pretty much similar in the situation. I don't know. There's just something about this team, man, that just is kind of stinky to me.
Bad
and
vibes.
Something about this roster, something about this franchise right now, just giving me, like you said, bad vibes. And hey, maybe I'm completely wrong, and that's fine by me because this team's fun to watch when they're good. But there's something going on in Cincinnati for me that I just can't buy into this team right now. But yeah, so 11-6, 9-8, you have them around 12 wins as well as the 9-8, 8-9 area. Let's get to our final team here. Okay. Am I crazy to believe that this team could easily finish second again in the AFC North? And we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not at all?
Not at all.
I have so it's kind of a 180 from the Bengals and Steelers for me, which is funny because if you go and listen to, the TV networks that are talking about this season, it's the exact opposite. I have, for some reason, this sneaky suspicion that the Steelers are going to be able to have a very, very successful season, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. First, I want to get into that. How do you feel about their current quarterback situation, and who do you think should be or will be the QB for the Steelers? And at the same time, do you expect to change at some point as well?
Okay. I think it should be Justin Fields. I think it will be Russell Wilson to start.
We're on the same page.
I just like the ability that Fields has when it comes to extending plays, getting away from pressure. I just like that more than what Russell Wilson has at this point in his career. Plus, I mean, if Russell let's say Russell has a bounce back year, you're going to have to pay Russell top dollar. I think Fields is still under one more year of control. I think, now that I say that, I think they declined his 5th year option. So I think this is the last year of Fields under contract. So they're kind of under the same boat. But I just like what Fields has. He brings to the Steelers with his mobility. I think he's able to make plays. Now, what comes with that is Fields, I think, throws more interceptions than Russell did last year, and which could cost the Steelers. I mean, the Steelers I see this meme and I see this comparison all the time, but they are like my Iowa Hawkeyes. If you control the ball, if you can play good defense, you're going to be in almost any single game. And I think you take that risk if you put Fields in. But I think if you put Fields in, I think your ceiling is so much higher. But on the flip side, your floor could be a lot worse versus having Russell in.
Yeah. I think it should be Justin Fields. I think it's going to be Russell Wilson as well. I see this as a situation, you mentioned Russell Wilson, if he has a breakout year, they're going to have to pay them. Who says? Who says that they have to re-sign him after this year? This is his final year in his contract, right?
He's making $1 million because he's still getting paid $40 million a year from Denver.
So who says? Why not try a situation where if Wilson has a good year, use that as an opportunity for Justin Fields to learn through him the whole season. And then if you don't see Russell taking this franchise anywhere, because he is getting up there in age, and mobile quarterbacks, when they get up in there in age, is a little different than a pocket quarterback. And so maybe it's a situation where Fields can learn from him from a year. You can find a way to sign maybe Fields to a 1-year, 2-year deal. And then the next year, Fields has an opportunity to prove whether or not he can be the guy for the Pittsburgh Steelers the following season.
Right. I like that take a lot, actually, because, like you said, if they find out that Fields our guy. Fields is what, 20? He's got to be only 25 or 26. Like, he's going to be more promising, and he's going to be building that Steelers future better than a 34 or 35-year-old Russell Wilson at this point in his career.
Yeah, and so, but if Russell has a great season this year, keep riding with that. You shouldn't ever, just bench a guy. But it's kind of like off-brand version of like Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Not saying Justin Fields is Patrick Mahomes whatsoever, but like just giving the opportunity for the guy to learn for a year, because he was put in a very crappy situation, a crappy organization, and a crappy like just roster. So he didn't really have a chance to like learn, in my opinion, to be a star. And maybe learning from a former Super Bowl quarterback and a former Super Bowl winning coach, a coach that I don't know, has he ever had a losing season?
No, there's that dumb stat out there that Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season.
So if they've had this terrible quarterback room for all these years and yet they still haven't had a losing season, imagine them with a halfway decent quarterback. If Wilson can be decent, this team is going to be dangerous. I truly believe they're going to be dangerous. Are they going to be competing for a Super Bowl? Probably not. But I feel like if Russell Wilson or if Justin Fields turns out to be pretty decent, maybe borderline top half of the league. Oh, if he's over top half of the league, one of the quarterbacks, this team's going to be really fun to watch.
Right. I would like to remind the people that are watching or listening the Steelers quarterback stats of last year to really like hammer home what me and Brock are hyping, right? Like emphasizing so much. So Kenny Pickett started 12 games for him last year. He had a touchdown in half of those games. So he had 6 touchdowns on the year, 4 interceptions, with a QBR of 38. Okay? Mitch Trubisky started 2 games for him, went 0-2, had 4 touchdowns, 5 picks, had a QBR 34.6. Their only semi-good quarterback, funny enough, was Mason Rudolph, who in his 3 starts went 3-0, 3 touchdowns, and had a QBR 70.6. And if they can get a 60 QBR and a guy that's not going to turn the ball over all the time and a guy that's consistent for him, I really like Pittsburgh. And plus, with the uncertainty of Cleveland and Cincinnati, I really like what you said at the start of this. I think Pittsburgh could finish second in this division. And if Baltimore has regression, who knows? Pittsburgh could easily win this division too, because Pittsburgh is that
I'm not against that, dude.
Defense still.
I'm not against that. I feel really good about Pittsburgh for some reason. If they're able to figure out that QB situation, because I feel like their defense is still going to be really good. That's the best thing about this division, is that pretty much everybody's defense is at least like capable of being pretty good. 2 of them I feel like are on levels of their own versus the other 2. But yeah, looking at their record and their schedule, I have their ceiling around 11-6. Which would be 1 more win, if I remember right. Yeah, 1 more win than what they had last year. And then even their floor, it's one of those things similar to the Kansas City Chiefs. Until I see differently, I can't believe it otherwise. They're not going to go below 500. I got them at 9-8 as their floor.
I think me and you have the same floor for Pittsburgh. I also have 9-8. I would have to say, though, their ceiling could be 12-5. Like, I'm very bullish on this Pittsburgh team. I like some of the additions they made in the offseason. Like, I don't even know if we've talked about their first-round pick they made in Troy Fatuanu, who's going to step right in and help that O-line, which was one of the weaknesses for Pittsburgh last year. And this is all, we're recording this before any Brandon Ayuk things happen. If we find out
if they get Brandon Ayuk, I might actually put them as the favorite. I'm not going to lie.
Right. If they get Brandon Ayuk, I think we totally have to rethink what Pittsburgh, like, their ceiling could be. Because now you would then have Brandon Ayuk, a year 3 George Pickens, who's, I think, primed for a breakout season. You still have guys like Najee Harris and Jalen Warren and
Cordell Patterson.
Yeah, and Cordell Patterson, who's only going to help those other guys. I think if that happens, I think they should be the favorite to win that division.
So when we do these, I actually do pan out like where I think each team will finish in the division. I have the Steelers being second in the AFC North, and I actually have the Bengals finishing last in the AFC North, just because something fishy is going on there. So I got the Ravens at 1, Steelers at 2, Browns at 3, and the Bengals at 4. But the thing about this division is, just because that's the order, it could be a 3-way tie for second.
Right. This division last year, I'm going to pull it up. Was fair out. You take Baltimore out of it. Was within second place was within 2 games of fourth place. Like the Browns went 11-6, finished second. Steelers went 10-7, finished third. Cincinnati finished fourth with a 9-8 record. Like all it takes is a few more division games to be flipped, and maybe Cincinnati finishes 2, or maybe Cleveland finishes 2, or maybe Baltimore finishes third, or something like that. This division is just that competitive. I mean, I believe they're the most competitive division in the league. I think you could argue the NFC North this year, but this division has been super competitive the last 4 or 5 years, really ever since Cincinnati got Joe Burrow, and because Cleveland's been pretty solid the last 2 or 3 years. Like, I don't know. This is one of the divisions that's going to beat up on each other real bad, and this is going to be a division also that a lot of teams are going to finish within the same record of each other.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing to actually be in this division, though? Because it's like you get to play the tough teams, but at the same time, your record may not show how good you actually are.
I think it's a good thing anytime you get you play some of the best teams in the league. So if you're a team like Cincinnati, for example, and you know you have the potential to go back to the AFC title game, but you don't know with this particular group, playing teams like Cleveland, or Baltimore, and Pittsburgh, yeah, those games are going to be tough. You may lose a few, but if you're able to get into the playoffs, who knows what happens? But you're battle tested. You're ready. I think anytime you can have competition for good games like that is only going to help you in the future.
Dude, I'm super excited. We're so close to football, man. With college
Thursday,
football,
baby.
week 1 is this week, and then the next week is the NFL season. We made it. We're getting closer. That also means that we need to kick it into gear with some of these previews. I think, how many more divisions do we still have? Like
I think just 2.
Just 2?
No, I think well, once we get the next one done for today, I think we just have 2 left.
Okay.
I think it's just the AFC South and the NFC. No, we did the
AFC East, I think.
AFC East, yep.
I like it. And the AFC South, I was thinking about it today, could be the AFC North of the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because of how young and competitive those teams are. So we'll see what happens there. But any final thoughts on the AFC North? Real quick, actually, I do wanted to get your opinion on some things that have been going on in the NFL recently. CeeDee Lamb, it looks like he has officially got his contract that he wanted. What are your early thoughts on that?
Well, it's good for my fantasy team. Kidding. I don't have CeeDee Lamb. It's good for everyone who drafted him in fantasy, though. I know a couple of my buddies were scared to take him just because, contract situation. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a risk you have to take, but I think the Cowboys had to get this done eventually before the season. I'm glad they got it done right now versus like a day or 2 before the actual game, their first game of the year. So and he's not the highest paid. I think he's still behind Jefferson in salary per year. I think his total contract though is he got more guaranteed money than Jefferson, obviously. I like it for the Cowboys. They're going to have to start paying their guys soon. Micah Parsons' contract is coming up very soon. Dak Prescott is wanting a new deal next offseason. We'll see. They've had so many good teams the last few years where they have so many good players around them. But I think that bill's coming due where they're going to have to start paying their stars very soon.
Dallas has pretty much made it, or at least Jerry Jones has made it clear that pretty much this year is all. I think their slogan this year is all in. So it's this year or never with this roster. Mm-hmm. So if they don't make a run this year, it's going to be fun, to say the least, of watching their offseason. Because anytime the Cowboys are in turmoil, I personally believe it's fun to watch. But I also wanted to get your thoughts as a Kansas City fan. Chiefs did waive Kadarius Toney. Any thoughts on that?
I'm gonna say this before I start my rant about Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney, I appreciate you for Super Bowl 57. I think you were a vital part of that team. That punt return against the Eagles will go down as one of my favorite plays ever because it totally flipped the momentum of the game. And then for you to score on the ensuing play, I think we don't win the Super Bowl without you. That being said, dog, you cost us like 3 games last year. So I think your time in Kansas City was done a while ago. I just think that Kansas City was working out a trade for you and obviously couldn't find one. The Detroit game comes to mind where it's the pick six. The Buffalo game last year comes to mind where he's offsides. I don't want that to be my lasting image of Tony as a Chief, but it will be, unfortunately. I want people's memory of Tony as a Chief to for him in Super Bowl 57 being a vital part of that team, getting the 70-yard punt return that kind of just jump-started this team and gave him momentum in that game.
Hey, but you guys did get another decent receiver out of it, though, with the return of Juju Smith-Schuster after getting released by the Patriots. What are your thoughts on that specifically? Because I think that's a huge get, whether people realize it or not, just because it's a guy that knows Mahomes and knows that system. So you did lose Tony, but you got Juju, who was there with that that second Super Bowl team with Mahomes.
Yeah, I like the Juju addition. I think it raises the floor of the receiver room. I still think guys like Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, and Xavier Worthy are going to be ahead of him, even guys like Justin Watson. But I think it's just added depth. Now, I have a theory. I wonder if this means Rashee Rice is going to get suspended soon, and Kansas City wanted an insurance policy in case he does. But I hope that's not the case. I hope Rice plays this year at least. Because, man, this receiving core is going to be fun to watch if he doesn't get suspended. But, no, overall, I like the addition of Juju.
Just don't sleep on Juju, man. I actually your guys' receiving room is, I truly believe, one of the most underrated ones in the league. And by the end of the season, because Mahomes is able to elevate people to levels that other quarterbacks are unable to do, I think a lot of people are going to realize, when he has a really, really good receiving room and tight ends, it's tough to beat the Chiefs. And that's why they're going for championship 3 in a row.
I heard this good analogy. And it's like last year Kansas City played death by 1,000 cuts. But now they have the scissors in Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy to just rip the entire piece of paper in one bit. They have the guys that are going to go 80 yards down the field for a touchdown, which is what they didn't have last year.
They're going to be a difficult team to beat. That's for sure. And I know you're excited about it. Everybody else, we're kind of like, share the sugar with the Super Bowls, man. It's not fair. Any final thoughts on Kansas City, anything going on in the NFL right now, or the AFC North?
Not really. Not anything that comes to mind right now.
Perfect. Well, we will sign off here. We will be back later this week with the NFC South. So the Buccaneers, Saints, Falcons, and Panthers. Dawson's going to give a big take on his Carolina Panthers that he's got this season. And if you see us in our same gear that we're wearing right now, that's definitely because we're recording this right after. And it'll probably be up Friday morning. And then we will also have our 5-on-5 sports podcast, our college football podcast up on Thursday morning, because one of our games of the week includes a game that is happening Thursday night. I know Dawson and I, and a lot of people in the Midwest at least, are going to be tuned into that North Dakota State Colorado game. I think a lot of people in the Northwest know, and the Midwest know what's coming to Colorado, but we'll see what happens. But for now, we will sign off here. We'll see you guys on Thursday or Friday, depending on which episodes you guys listen to. But for Dawson Livingston, I'm Brock Bierman. We are the Sports Nerds here on the 515 Podcast Network. Make sure to follow, subscribe anywhere that you consume our podcast, whether that's on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Also follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Dawson's been posting some of our preseason stuff. But for now, we'll see you guys in a couple days.